Expected life before he decided he didn't want to know anymore. But you know, if you know people, then you just draft them back in when you need them. Well done, Ted. Thank you very much. Our note taker is not here tonight, so thank you to Isabel, wherever Isabel is, for taking the notes this evening. And the other thing I wanted to mention, oh, you're over there. You'll have to speak up. The other thing I wanted to mention, it's coming to the end of the financial year for the Society, and the auditor that we have used in the past is no longer available. So if you are able, or you know of anybody that's able to do the Society a favour, perhaps you could speak to me afterwards. Or if you'd like the opportunity to have a go, you know, we can give you a green pen. That's what they used to do in my day. It used to be an auditor with a green pen. You always knew when they'd been around. So there we go. One or two other things to tell you, but we'll wait until afterwards because this evening our speaker is Michael Blackburn. He's been with us a time or two before. Michael worked for the Ordnance Survey for some 40 years. You wouldn't think so, would you? He looks too young, doesn't he? Where he gained much of his knowledge. And he delivers extensive lectures. He was just telling me that he was appearing in the Grosvenor in Chester, and 350 people. You know, it's an auditorium, cameras all around. I know you're here tonight. We've only got one camera. Sorry about that, Michael. That's all right. But, anyway, Michael's subject this evening is a changing coastline. So I'll leave you with the capable hands of Michael Blackburn. Thank you, Michael.
Right, nice to see you all again. I don't know how long ago it was I was here last, but certainly I've been here a few times. This subject is a very interesting one, and with recent archaeological discoveries, it's got a lot of shock. We are going through a phase at the moment where we can actually say the coastline is so familiar to us. Watch this space. I have a friend, he's a brain surgeon, a good person to have as a friend. He decided January last year to go with some friends of his. They're very keen ocean sailors, and they've hired a large yacht at Tierra del Fuego, the southern tip of South America, in January to sail around the western coast of Antarctic. He showed me the pictures when he came back. To me, who's interested in geography, I don't know everything about the planet, but I'm sure you all love to watch documentaries on the television, that sort of thing. But he showed me pictures going down from Tierra del Fuego, down the isthmus that juts towards South America, and the photographs had no ice flow, no icebergs. The land there has peaks on it up to 6,000 feet, no snow, and of course the problems you've heard, it's probably in the news regularly. It's our main, there are other locations, it's our main location on the planet where there are large groups of penguins. The penguins have all moved to the eastern side because of the reduction in the ice flow and the natural habitat that they're used to. Also other penguins from there that in the summer months tend to swim up the Pacific coast of South America to the Atacama Desert. Really strange, penguins at a desert. A lot of them are not going there now because the raise in the temperatures. I know we hear all this all the time about global warming. I'm going to swear, I don't swear, don't write this down. Bloody storms, we've got another one this weekend. They really get on your nerves, don't they? But that's part of global warming. If the temperatures rise, you get greater convection, which means more rainfall, okay? But one of the shocks, I suppose, that's happening is we are now getting a truer picture because we've been studying tidal action, certainly since the early 1800s, but certainly from about 1912 to the present day, tidal surveys have been taking place virtually every year. I was involved with tidal surveys with the Ordnance Survey. It's a great question. When you first got trained with the Ordnance Survey, because you thought you're going to be surveying roads and housing estates, one of the questions that came in the training course at the beginning was, what is the greatest change that happens in Britain on a daily basis? And people say, oh, house building, industrial estates, new motorways. No. The greatest change is the coastline. As we're sitting here now, major changes are happening. So this talk is based on that, and I'm going to give you some information which goes back over 3,000 years, certainly back to the year 120 AD, and recent discoveries by William Ashton in the 1920s, and survey that's taking place at the present moment, even in your own area, at Kimmel Bay, Talacra, on the Dee Estuary, West Kirby, and up the coastline past Southport to Blackpool. We have got a major problem. And if I hit you with this before I get going, we haven't got enough concrete to sort the problem out. And I'll explain as we go. Okay, so there's me during my working life. I'm on the little Orme. You can see the Great Orme in the background. On this particular day, this was 1986, we were surveying the foundations and development of Theatre Cymru on the promenade at Llandudno. It was just being constructed in 1986. So that's all those years ago. I think I've aged. I dye my hair. Somebody said, you know, it's very, what do you call it? Yeah, I won't go any further. Right, next picture, please. Our picture operator. Focus, yeah. Here's another one, just me on a tripod. I'm above Deganwy. You can see the link road to Llandudno in the lower left corner. Deganwy, Conway Estuary, Conway Mountain, you can see that. So there's the nature of our coastline. I hope you all agree we live in a beautiful area. Yeah? There's not many locations in the British Isles where you get mountains 2,000 and 3,000 feet close to the coastline. Doesn't happen in the Lake District. Yes, it happens a lot on the west coast of Scotland. Certainly doesn't happen in England. I love throwing facts in because it's a great fact for you. Do you know this? Pemmermount Mountain. I'm sure you all pass through the tunnel on the Pemmermount Mountain on a regular basis. Pemmermount Mountain is the only crag on the coastline of England and Wales which is over 1,000 feet and it dips its toes in the sea. That doesn't happen anywhere else on the Welsh-English coastline. A little bit at Treble, beyond Carnarvon. The summit there is 900 feet, so it's not over 1,000. When you go down the coast of Wales, all the way down the south to Pembrokeshire, there are no hills anywhere over 600 feet touching the sea. Cornwall has one summit, 480 feet. Golden Cap in Dorset is the highest summit on the south coast from Cornwall to Kent, 680 feet. Go around Essex, Suffolk, all the way up, Norfolk, Lincolnshire, Yorkshire. You think I read an encyclopedia, don't you? And you get to just north of Whitby, and there's a summit there which has cliffs, and it's 800 feet above sea level. So from the Solway Firth at Carlisle, and from up Northumberland, the coastline going towards, let's say Newcastle, all the way around, we have the only location where a crag over 1,000 feet touches the sea. That's very unique. I think you can possibly go into the Firth of Forth and the Clyde at Glasgow and Edinburgh, and still you won't equal that height with a crag. So there's something very fortunate with our landscape. But of course it's linked to the sea. We have only a sea on this side, the Irish Sea. But my God, can it shake things up? Okay, next picture. There's an old map showing the counties of the UK. We can go back hundreds of years. The counties linked to religion were beginning to be recorded in about 600 AD. So we've got that growth of what we know as boundaries, you know, Denbighshire, Flintshire, the old county of Clwyd, and then Carnarvonshire, which knocked on your door just up the road when it was Carnarvonshire. It was the largest county in North Wales. So there's a map of those old counties, and those counties tell us a history, because we are all regulated. You may not know this, but we're all regulated by population control. This is how governments work. They need something to align to what they're doing, and the populations of the country relate to the counties. Big problem in Berkshire at the moment. You probably know it's to do with a lot of the immigrants coming into the country. Many of them are being housed there, but there's a major development in Cardiff. There's also ones in Sussex and Hampshire, which are trying to absorb all these that are coming in. So our population's growing. There is our country on a map. Let's just say this for a moment. I'm a patriot. Yes, Wales, England, Scotland, Ireland are names, but we're actually a group of 6,200 islands. Around those two main centres, there's 6,200 islands, each one over an acre in size. Population in 1950, great date, was 50 million. Population as we sit here now is balancing on the 70 million mark. You want to compare that to other countries? Just pick Greece. Their population's 12 million. And you think of all the immigrants coming in there. Next picture. And what affects all of our lives? Now, you're going to say to me, no, that doesn't. I only go in my garden. And I go to Tesco's or Asda and do a bit of shopping, so this that I'm going to mention doesn't affect you. Well, I'm sorry, it does. There's a muddy coastline with a sunset. And one of the problems we have is a thing called tidal drift. We, in this area, come under the effect of a label we've had for centuries now, the Liverpool Tide Action. It's spiral. It comes down the coast from Blackpool, past the Mersey, past the Dee, takes the fresh water out of those rivers and the Ribble, comes along our coast, going from east to west, whips out into the channels off the Great Orme, and then starts silting up the Menai Strait. There's an example of the Menai Strait at low tide. I'm building up a picture for you. You'll get the details there. Okay, next picture. We have evidence, and I find this amazing, because I don't know if you know Jonathan Miller, scientist, artist, great believer in life. I don't believe in everything. He has a great statement. He says, your career in life is to suffer, and your profession is to die. Thank you, Jonathan, who's produced some of the greatest operas and stage and theatre shows and everything in life. But what's interesting is, in history, there have been certain people that stand out. Now this is showing North Wales. It's got the two names on there, the Decangries and the Ordvices, the two large tribal areas that occupied this area. Francis Lynch, head of archaeology and history in Bangor University for 42 years, actually made a statement based on her own archaeological studies with students. She did a lot of work around Brennig. She did a lot of work on the hills above Rowen, Pemmermouth, Llanfairpwllgwyn, and on Anglesey. She did an estimate that in 1 AD, the population of North Wales was about 10,500 people. It's just over 300,000 now. Okay? So we're only talking 2024 years. We're not talking a long time. Next picture, please. And we have an early map. I think I've shown those of you that were with me before, I've shown you this before. This is the Bodleian early map that was found in 1891 in the Bodleian Library. There was a parchment in a tube. It hadn't been opened for years, a wooden tube. When they pulled it out of the tube, it exploded into thousands of little pieces. And it took Professor Guth and his students, they think about 6 years altogether to piece it all together. I've tilted it on its side so that you can see this is North Wales. So here's the Dee, here's the Clwyd, here's the Conway, here's the Sayont, here's the island of Bardsea, and here's here's Anglesey, and there's Puffin Island off Rhuddlan. What? The tide's not that strong. But what's interesting is it's a Saxon script drawing, a rough drawing. The estimated date is 1325. It shows ecclesiastical centres. We in North Wales hold the continuous longest reign of a Christian centre. Bangor, Wattle Fence. The cathedral there, in its stonework, is a building, not a cathedral, that dates back to 532 AD. There's only one older than that, that's Whithorn in Galloway, St Ninian's base, which dates back to 320 AD. We're talking Christianity. So somebody has actually produced a map. I love the porcupine in the middle. It's supposed to be Snowdon, I presume. The rivers are partly named, but they're in a Saxon language. So there's translations on there. But what it actually shows is routes of travel. Now let's get something straight right from this, before I dive into this. We take all this, what I'm going to say, for granted. You've got one on your doorstep, a bridge over the river Clwyd. We take culverts, bridges, embankments, cuttings. We take drainage and everything else for granted. I bet if I asked any of you, you haven't I nearly swore there. You haven't a clue about the drainage, not from your house, but the street you live in and where it goes. And yet it's part of our integration control of the landscape. Go back to this period, 1300, there was none of that. So if you wanted to walk from Rhuddlan to Bangor, think of the rivers you've got to cross. There's no bridges, no tunnels, no railways, no proper roads or anything. You're talking trackways, and each community would have a few methods of getting out of their community. Maybe to the sea, say Abergele, Pensarn area for fishing, similarly at Prestatyn or whatever. But much of that landscape we have changed, and we couldn't live in this landscape without the changes we've made. And many of those changes have affected our coastlines. Next picture. There's your coastline. This was taken, I think it was about 9 months after the serious floods in 1991. Kibble Bay, Towyn, and a few other areas. I'm up on the hill above Prestatyn, Melodin, looking down on Melodin area, and what you can actually see there is what is basically, geographically, the largest delta in North Wales. It's a massive triangle, from Tulacra inland, beyond Rhuddlan to St Asaph, from the Abergele area, Lisfine, all down the other side. It's a massive triangle. And there's only one thing that stopped the water flooding it every month: the railway being built. From 1845 through to eventually when the Britannia Bridge was opened in 1852, this area, but for 3 tidal banks developed by the railway. The first one you all drive along, if you go into Rhuddlan and drive along the Prom, that's actually built on the first railway tidal embankment. The second one's further in, where St Thomas's Church is, and the third one is as you get really to, you come into the area where Sainsbury's is up the road. There's 3 tidal banks. They're still there. They don't function properly anymore. We've had to have new tidal defences put in. Population in this area is estimated to be about 45,000 people, not including Rhuddlan, because you're on raised ground. Look what would happen if those defences weren't there. The tides are rising. I'll give you background to it in a moment. Next picture, please. There's the map of the area. There's a clue when you look at all the... I'm doing my sales bit now. There's a clue on all the survey map. Most people use a map. They go, where are we going from? Oh, we're going from Rhuddlan to Bristol, but we want to go to Whitchurch first, and we want to go into Stoke-on-Trent, and you use sat-nav or maps or whatever. Well, maps do something else. Up here on the hills, Gwymuscor, that area, coming right the way down to just off St Asaph, look at the field system. It's developed in a nature to fit the landscape. Look at the field system here. It's developed because of drainage. The clue is there. Your river is canalised. We know that. You know the history. Edward I, St James and St George, developing the castles, learning from the Romans. We all learned from somebody else previously. The Romans conquered North Wales, the east coast of Britain, the south coast, by using the estuaries. This is no different. So when Edward I had the problem with the nomadic, angry Welsh tribes, we all have our bitter troubles in life, don't we? He decided to build a series of castles to contain it, but some of them had to be on estuaries. So Flint, Rhuddlan, Conwy, Carnarvon, Harlech. Criccieth was a Welsh prince's castle, he took that over. When you look at the history, and then you go back to the Romans, where are the Roman forts? Well, obviously Belvoir, Chester was the biggest one. A larger one than that was Ribchester on the Ribble near Preston. Further south, you've got Canovium in the Conway Valley. At one point, I think the date was about 280 AD. It was fortified with over 3,500 soldiers. Saguntium, and then you go around the coast to Tomenamere, Pennell, down on the Dovey, and further. There's Roman fortifications everywhere. They're using the sea. The Romans conquered Britain by going round the coastline, building marching camps, then trading stations and small towns with garrisons, and then built the roads later to link all the coastline. Their occupation of the UK. I'm shocked at the Roman Empire. A lot of people don't realise this. We had an empire that maybe lasted, let's put a round figure, 300 years, yeah, in its growth and then final collapse. The Roman occupation, first of all in Italy and around the north coast of the Mediterranean, grew from 786 BC. And it didn't start collapsing until 600 AD back in Italy. That's why you're sitting in a Roman building now. What's he talking about? The Romans taught us right angles, gable roofs, drainage, underfloor heating, water supply. We haven't flipping well advanced, really. Yes, we use modern materials, but we're still doing what the Romans taught us. So the Romans and Edward I were using the coastline. Next picture. That's home, isn't it? And of course the clue with it is, although it's silted up now, over there where that fir tree is, that conifer, just below the castle, obviously all of that was a tidal pool years ago, where the ships could come in, lay an anchor, be unloaded, da-da-da-da-da. Agadia Bridge was a drawbridge when it was constructed in the middle. It wasn't stone originally, in the early days. The other clue is, it's not the boundary, originally, between Denbighshire and Flintshire. It's further over near St Asaph Avenue. Yeah? There's a stream over there that used to be, long ago, more of a deep water tidal channel than the Clwyd is here. It's moved. Look on the Ordnance Survey map. Look where the county boundaries are, the old ones, and you can see what's changed. Okay, next one. So, this is where the important bit comes in. We have a lot of history, we have a lot of documentation. This is the growth of the Roman Empire. It doesn't look fantastic now compared to what we're all doing on the planet. 8 to 9 billion of us. But they managed to get into the Turkey area, the Middle East. See, they knew there was always going to be trouble in the Middle East. Yeah. Didn't they? Yes. North Africa, obviously Egypt. The main countries of the constituents of Europe, so obviously Greece and Italy and Spain and France and parts of Gaul, Germany. So there's the growth. The Romans weren't great oceanographers. They tended to sail round the coastlines. Their galleys were very suited to what they did. They were strong, but they would not cross long distances across seas and oceans. So they hugged the coastlines. Once they built their fortifications all around the coast, they then linked with a road system. We still follow that road system now, don't we? The A5 follows the route. I know it's Telford's design, but it follows the old Roman road. Next picture. And then we have a coastline north of us, including here in North Wales, that has gone through another major stage in the last 90, 100 years, a thing we call tourism. Yeah? You've got it on your doorstep. Prestatyn, Rhyl, Pensarn, Colwyn Bay, Ross-on-Sea, Penrhyn Bay, Llandudno, and then on Anglesey as well. Tourism took off once the railways have developed. And that tourism has developed some of the biggest seaside resorts in the whole of Europe. Blackpool is the biggest seaside resort in the whole of Europe. It's got a population of 330,000 people. That's more than North Wales. For some reason, everybody reaches 60, 65, 70 and wants to retire there. Right, now listen to this. I'll change my event now. In 100 AD, and we can't confirm that, so I don't quote me as being right, because nobody knows. In 100 AD, a young boy was born in Egypt. I think it was called Salamis he was born. That's virtually the only bit of detail of his life we have. And by the time he reached the age of 16, we think, he'd become one of the cleverest surveyor, landscape measurers and studier of the heavens probably the world's ever known. His name was Ptolemy. Most of you have probably heard of Ptolemy. If you go on the internet, if you're on the internet, or you go into one of these great periodical books studying the history of us, when you start looking at Ptolemy, I can tell you now, by the time you've got to about the 6th page, it frightens you off, because the mathematics are unbelievable. He introduced the Romans to triangulation, but not here on the ground, up there. And he was studying planet movements, very primitive telescopes, so he's basically using eyesight, star clusters, the movement of the sun and the moon. We've got this amazing eclipse that's just about to happen, haven't we, in the next few days. He studied it all for the rest of his life until we think 178 AD. So he lived for 78 years. We think. There's no actual details. In that time, he became probably, up to that point, the most successful astronomer on the planet. Galileo in the 1600s studied him. More recent people studying the star thing studied him. But he's the person who put it down in writing. The whole universe revolves around the Earth. But he was wrong. He also worked out that distances could be worked out if you had a grid system on mapping. Latitude and longitude. He didn't call it that. That's a later description. So he'd worked out if you had distances, whatever the Roman figures were, around the planet, you could then locate where the landscape was. And we have 4 sketches which historians, surveyors, archaeologists have laughed their heads off for nearly 2,000 years. Your coastline here. Like rubbish. Never look like that. Well, we've had 2 upsets in the last 7 years. One is off New Brighton on the Wirral, where they've discovered the remains of a Roman trading port 3.5 miles out under the sea, and also jetties and deliverance points to a trading port at Bryn Shenkin on Anglesey, which is on the land that Ptolemy's description showed the Menai Strait was only about 200 metres maximum wide, not a deep sea channel as it is now. We've also got other finds of his from his sketches around East Anglia, certainly around Porchester, Portsmouth on the south coast, and archaeologists are now starting to go, hold on a minute, this chap was very accurate. He did 3 trips by galleys around the coast, and we're fortunate because he came to our area, and according to his sketches, I'm going to show you more detail in a moment, watch my finger, West Kirby, up to about 3 miles off the Ribble here was land. The Mersey didn't exist on his sketches. The Ribble actually went north, and where Blackpool is was a massive great mud sandbank that only appeared once or twice a year. People said they'd seen it, but they tried to take measurements. Further north at Lancaster, the coastline looks good, but he's marked another trading port and garrison centre above Glaison Dock, 4 miles out in the sea. It's starting to pose a lot of questions. Next picture. This is in the Grosvenor Museum in Chester. If you haven't been there, I would say go. It's free. They've got a nice cafe in there. They do lectures nearly every week through the winter, different subjects. This is the diorama of the Roman Chester Diva. Okay, it shows the wild lands of Wales. Look, monsters out there. You think I'm joking, don't you? If you go back 12,000 years, not far from you here, at Bontnewydd Cave on the Elwy, they found remains of rhinoceros, saber-toothed tiger, rats that were 2 metres long. That's only 5 miles away from you, I think, 5 or 6 miles. So, this is their base for this part. Why did they come here? Let's get it straight now about the Romans' conquest. They used the sea, they followed the coastlines. Why come to Britain? Their name for it. Why come here? Well, they've obviously found out from local people that in these hills there's lead, there's copper, there's limestone, there's sandstone, there's shales, there's peat. People burnt peat a lot a long time ago when they couldn't have any wood. They've also found there was evidence that there's silver and possibly gold. So their conquest of North Wales was for that reason. I know Hollywood turns into something else. The Romans came here and raped all the women. No, don't go there. Let's follow what they're here for. Why build a fortification in a town like that? It's a trading centre. Why else build it there? On a high tide, the water was deep and it came right up to the base of the walls, especially on Sealand Road. Sealand Road is where Chester's harbour used to be. I can't believe people don't know this. Chester had a big harbour right up until about 1930, and it was served by the canal branch off the Ellesmere Canal down to the harbour. But in Roman times, water came right up to almost the edge of the walls here. There was a big basin on this side, and it's only artistic impression, but they reckon at high tides in the basin there could be up to 20 Roman galleys at anchor or sitting on the seabed. That's why it's built here, but there's another clue. You can't do this on the Dee now because of the sluice that was put in for extracting fresh water in Chester. On a tidal Dee, you could possibly sail a reasonable sized vessel almost up to Rhuddlan. Why go there? You're on the edge of the hills where the different minerals are to be brought out. So the Romans are using the sea. Next picture. And there's the basic map. I'm sure you all know the area. I'm sure you've seen the artefact. You've got the main Roman road that goes down to Cargine near Bala. You've got the coastline route through your area. We don't know exactly where it was, completely around the St Asaph area, certainly through Bethesyn Rose. Carnovian, major fort in the Conway Valley, where Caerhun Church is. Another good evidence there. Masses of red sandstone blocks in the Conway Valley that built the fortification. There's no red sandstone in the Conway Valley. You've got some elements in the Vale of Clwyd. Then obviously 2 more bases over to Sgontium, and then the route going south. There's the Roman road system, and each of the major points are served by the sea. Next picture. I love this. This is an artist on Anglesey. He's done an artistic impression of the Romans arriving, and the local tribes are ready to defeat them. Can you imagine? You've never seen anything like this before. Some people are going out fishing in dugout lines. Can you imagine? You know? It's like the shock to the Welsh when they built Conway Castle. It must have been like being in New York. You know? They were all living in wooden huts. Okay, next one. And, of course, we've got plenty of Roman evidence across the whole country. There's a wonderful little book. You can even get it second-hand on eBay. It's the Constable Guide to the Occupation of Britain by the Romans over a 450-year period. We have got evidence all over the country. Chester's a classic. But this is Wroxeter, 2.5 miles to the east of Shrewsbury. It's the largest piece of Roman masonry still in its original position. Next picture. And so we end up with this situation which we are still using to this day in some form or other. There's our island, Briton. Here's the road system. There's a few missing. And all the major estuaries around the coastline have got ports. And there we are. They've controlled us. Do you know what that word's called? I'm sure you all talk it at least once a week. It's called politic. Look at the reason. Look in a dictionary at the word politic. It's not what we think now. That's not politic. Politic is what you're doing now. A group of people together, working together to create a lifestyle. You're a good woodworker, you're a good cook, you're a good plant grower, you're a good bricklayer, You all work together, you make a politic. And the biggest test of politic is, have you organised your kitchen correctly? Or do you have to walk all over the place because the fridge and the cooker is in the wrong place and all this stuff? Politic is you, not some bunch of people sitting in the Welsh Assembly or in Westminster. Next one. And we end up with a map. I'm obviously going to promote this because when you've heard the talk and you go away, if you get your OS map out, don't look at it just as the map of now. That map has been created over hundreds of years and it's recording all the changes in the landscape. What we all do. Next one. And the other thing we've got to thank the Duke of Westminster family at Eton Hall because they've managed to save many of the artefacts to do with the Romans and the history of the landscape we're living in. Much of it is on Eton Hall estate. That's one of the Roman columns there, where Watling Street crossed the River Dee. But also there's lots of things. Please go to the Grosvenor Museum if you haven't been there. Parking's awkward, but it's free to go in. And there's so much in there to do with this history. Next picture. And if you go to Castlefield in Manchester, which the Romans could sail right up to Castlefield, Deansgate, on the Mersey, which linked with the River Dee, I'll show you in a moment. And this is a reconstruction of a Roman gatehouse. You've probably got, I know we've got some little evidence of Roman occupation in Prestatyn, with a villa, and height of course under floor heating. But you've probably got some Roman remains here, which have probably been built on for centuries and nobody knows they're there. So there is the structure of Rome. Next one. And that's in the Grosvenor as well, a typical Roman guy, soldier, dressed up, Next one, please. And then we come to the coastline and go in more detail now. I worked on a project, and I'm here to shock you as well. You might not like what I'm going to say, but it's because I'm involved with highways, archaeology, government plans for the future. Now we've separated from Europe. I must keep off the politics. there is a plan, and I worked on it because of my knowledge of benchmarking to do with levelling. Since 2016, there's been a plan to increase our power sources. So 8 estuaries around the coastline have been looked at for tidal barrages. And I know the D's come up before. Well, it's hot on the list now. So we're looking at Talacra, we're looking at the gas terminal where the old Point Bear Colliery used to be. And they are now looking at the finance. Now this won't be government projects, it will be private investment. The estuaries they've looked at and are considering seriously are the Solway Firth up at Carlisle, Dumfries. They're looking at the Ribble. They're looking at the Loon. Seriously looking at the Wash. Looking at the Humber at Hull and Grimsby. Plus 2 other estuaries in the south. One, the actual estuary that comes in at Exmouth to Exeter, and another one is along the coast near Southampton. They're looking at tidal barrages scattered around. Now there's the next thing. I'm allowed to say this to you. A government study and industrial study has said every single county in Britain should be self-sufficient producing electricity. It's no good on a national level. It needs to have local support. So what I'm going to tell you now is history and also evidence. So we're looking at the mouth of the Dee. Next picture. And you know the communities along the Dee. There's a lot of history. I always throw a little snippet. I love this. We have a document. This is on the internet. I love this. This document's brilliant. At the Greenfield Basin, near Holywell, there was a document produced. I think the date is 911 AD. The monks in this area were producing wine. And there was a document that was produced, the sale of wine to Brittany, northern France. Yes! Welsh wine going to France. Brilliant. 910 or 911 AD. Next one. There it is, the Greenfield Basin. Now, of course, we've got a long history to do with the Dee, with shipping, fishing, trade with Ireland, trade around the Europe areas, up over Scotland to Norwegian areas, and many trading routes across the Atlantic. So the Dee's very important. Next one. But here's William Ashton's map. And this is proved from archaeological and tidal surveys going back pre-1921. He's looking at a period 2,000 years ago. Liverpool is here. Got its charter in 1207 under King John. Southport, just up here. West Kirby, New Brighton. The evidence back then, just after the First World War, was over 1,800 to 2,000 years ago. The coastline was further out, which agrees with the evidence of Ptolemy. There is a stream that comes from over here, I think it comes from Ormskirk, Altcar, and it comes in north of Liverpool into the estuary area. And that whole area now has been evidenced, even with recent surveys, that the coastline was further out. The Mersey, as we know as the pool, was the feeding of a river, and Mersey, M-E-R-S-E-A, is a Saxon word. That name comes from the river that came through here at Ince, near Ellesmere Port, flowed through the low-lying land into the Dee, just to the west of Chester. And what formed the pool was the River Birket, which Birkenhead is named after. The Birket comes from a lake that was at Heswall, fresh water, into the area where the docks are, up Birkenhead, Seaforth, that area, and then flowed south into this pool, meeting the Mersey, coming from the Manchester area, Runcorn. Those towns didn't exist then. And into this low-lying area through here. When Telford was constructing under contract the extension of the Ellesmere Canal, he used the same route from Chester, because it's low-lying land. Okay? And the Dee was a lot deeper then, and it had a faster flow because you don't have the sluice in Chester that slows the fresh water down. There's lots of evidence. Handel, the opera musician, when he was going to see the first performance of his Messiah in Dublin, he boarded a packet steamer near Heswall and went across to Ireland. Ships like that couldn't operate in the Dee now, there's too much silting up. So we've got a plan there. This is William Ashton, there's plenty about him on the internet. He wrote books and he studied the landscape, and he studied the sea coastline in great detail, doing surveys, going out in boats, finding evidence and everything else. He not only studied the coastline, but he studied many large sandbanks and mudbanks. And we've got plenty of evidence which in recent times has confirmed what he found. Okay, next one. When you look at this area, this growth, and remember, industrialisation has changed our landscape completely. I was shocked to see that illustration over there of the foundry at Rhuddlan. I was here as a young lad. I never remember seeing all that with the chimneys. But here, similarly, we've got a massive change in growth. We've got the Weaver, which drains northern Cheshire, and the Weaver navigation, which Telford once again was involved with. But the Weaver pours into the Mersey, and then that floodplain, which has silted up a lot now for many reasons, because these rivers are carrying material down. Lateral moraine is being carried. That change that's happening was happening thousands of years ago, is still happening to this day. And if we wanted an estuary to Manchester, because, Manchester Ship Canal was full, but if we wanted the estuary, it'd have to be dredged all the time to get ships to go there. So the evidence shows that tidal shift, tidal action, is changing everything. Next one. I've just put that in. There's the sluice, you all know it at Chester. The first water extraction point was here, next to the Dee Bridge, the old bridge, 600 AD. There's the sluice. Once that was built, it meant on most tides, ships couldn't go up the river anymore, but it meant it filtered fresh water into the pumping station to pump, first of all into Chester, and then it was pumped across that area to the growth of the towns and villages, eventually to Birkenhead, and then of course now, if you don't know Chester, the Huntington extraction point next to the bypass in Chester is extracting, as we sit here, every hour, something in the region of 17 million gallons out of the Dee, which is going to southern Manchester, to Warrington, to Liverpool and Birkenhead. And that's constantly happening. The Dee regulation scheme is the most controlled river scheme in the whole of the UK. And we need it. I hope you know your facts of your area. If you draw two parallel lines from here, North Wales, across to the southern Humber, it is actually an OS grid line, and you go from North Blackpool all the way across to York and Beverley on the north coast of the Humber, you've got 17 million population in that area, growing like mad. So water is the main commodity. Okay, next one. I sidetrack. And there's the clue of the low-lying land. The M53 is on the edge of it. This is the big junction north of Chester. M56 coming in, and obviously the motorway that forms the Chester bypass. Telford's Canal comes through the lowest point into the Ellesmere Port Harbour, but the river ran through here. It's just little streams now. And that's where the Mersey came through. There's one or two other clues. Ellesmere Port, BP Shell Refinery, is built on 4 bunds. And it has to be. It's the largest operational refinery in the whole of Europe at one location. Obviously there's many others around each country. Served by the Manchester Ship Canal, but if it wasn't built on those bunds to protect it, it would flood every day. And that's producing masses of what we take for granted, yes? Petrol, oil, gas, everything else. Right. Okay, next picture. Here's another effect of tidal change. You hear also, I'm going to politics, I shouldn't really focus on it. The figures at the moment say we are roughly 52 to 58% self-sufficient in Britain producing our own food. But we still have to import a heck of a lot. A lot comes from the Caribbean, certainly comes from Florida, certainly from Africa, the Gold Coast and all those areas, and other parts of Europe. So we're topped up. We are actually the biggest users in all the countries in Europe of bananas. Is that something to be proud of? I don't know. But agriculture is very important. What you're looking at here is the Kinnerton area, just to the southwest of Chester. That is the old Dee estuary. The only reason it doesn't flood is because all along the Dee, from Tulacra right the way up to Saltney and into Chester, there's 3 levels of tidal banks that stop the Dee from flooding. But of course, when you get saltwater flooding, you get fantastic minerals in the ground, which is great for growing crops. But there's an important thing that tidal increase will affect. You look at, go around the whole coastline of Britain, masses of agriculture all the way around the coastline. Much of it on a flat level. Right, next one. And then, right, where I'm showing you there, here's the canalised Dee. Act of Parliament 1732. It took 60 years to construct it to keep Chester on a tidal channel. 22 feet deep at low tide. So it's controlled with banks. Originally, all this to Kinnerton used to flood. And all that we call sea land, flipping obvious, isn't it? Used to flood as well. So it's only what we've done through the centuries that's holding back this tide. Next one. And there's the change point. If you go to Chester, you go on the Queen's Ferry dual carriageway and turn off for the Chester Road that goes towards Sealand. As you come into the old harbour area, just below this church, this is the old Chester Harbour. You can still see the remains of it there, docksides and that, but it's been built on with modern apartments. But that's a man-made bund. The River Dee used to go east from this point. Now it goes south to Saltney, 3 miles, and then 9 miles to Connors Quay. We have made that. That's not natural. Next picture. And there it is from Saltney, coming past Broughton Airfield, that area. Here's the banks. There's 3 levels of them. There's a big one here with hedges on. That stops the Dee flooding all that farmland and flat area. Doddleston, Kinnerton, all those areas, they couldn't be there. They'd be underwater on a weekly basis. Next one. I'm sure you'll recognise this.
Yeah.
Yeah? Yeah. So Queen's Ferry, the bridge. And of course that's the other clue. There used to be ferries. Saltney Ferry, Queen's Ferry, and the river was wider than that before the tidal banks were going. Okay, next one. And there we're looking out from the new bridge. I just wish they'd call that new, do you know the cable stay in Connors Quay? They should call it the Welsh Harp. Great name, isn't it? Welsh Harp, entry into North Wales. But if you just look at that, there's the gas-fired power station at Connors Quay. There's 8 gas-fired power stations in Britain. The government want to get rid of them because they are chucking more pollution in the air than you are with your gas central heating. All this is reclaimed land, and much of that over there as well. The Dee was a lot wider years ago. Okay, next one. And then we come to Liverpool. What a growth. At the current population level, they're at about 1,700,000. Birkenhead is something in the region of just over 200,000 and growing. Massive development around the docks at Birkenhead now. They're trying to make it like Salford Quays in Manchester. Massive development. Entertainments, apartments, hotels, everything. But there's the coastline, you know. And yet, Ashton and Ptolemy showed us the coastline's out here. These are km squares. 1, 2, 3, 4. Out there somewhere is the Roman trading port, which was never flooded. It's there under the waves. Next picture. And when you look at that growth, now I've got to mention something else, all right? 1/3 of the British population lives lower than 3.5 metres above mean sea level. London, Bristol, I'm only naming a few places, Exeter, go up around the east coast, you think of Hull, Grimsby, Cleethorpes, all these places, Sunderland, Newcastle's a bit lucky, it's on raised ground, but all these places have vast populations. There's a lot of people living in these places now who can't get insurance on their houses because of the threat of flooding. Next picture. And I know this one because I've worked there and I've done a survey there. All right, the base of the buildings, the three Graces, obviously the Cunard building, the Liverpool building, the old White Star. If you stand at the base, they're only 1.8 metres above high tide. Right, so now I've reached it's almost like a hiatus now. Here's a clue for you living here. We live on a north-facing coast. Okay, if you're not into north, south, east and west, never eat shredded wheat. What? We're on a north-facing coast, which means we're facing up to the Arctic. We're very lucky because it's a sea, not an ocean. Watch the waves this weekend. The evidence so far is that tidal levels on the planet have raised between 5 and 8 centimetres in the last 30 years. And they're increasing. But that's not the problem. The problem here is we're on a north-facing coast, and if you get serious strong winds from the northern part of the planet hitting our coastline, and we've had the rainfall we've had in the landscape over the last 5, 6, 12 months, all that precipitation is pouring down the rivers and streams, the Clwyd, and it's meeting high tides with a northerly wind coming to hit the coast. You've got a problem. The estimate is 70,000 houses between Prestatyn Brill and Pensarn could flood again. Yes, they've got defences in, and they're protected by triple action sluices. But when it lets the water in, it then slowly releases it again. We have a major problem, and it's not just here. Next picture. There's somebody cheered, Birkenhead. Was it Birkenhead? Yeah. It's the east float, isn't it? Yeah. East float, west float. Very few ships going in now because they've got a problem here. The drainage used to be good, and they could dredge up to the extended west float, which has now been filled in. So they've decided to redevelop the area. They're putting foundation pinning all around the harbour area to control, because it's the River Birket feeding it with fresh water. So they're piling all around the edges, making promenades, pubs, hotels, shopping precincts, 20, 30-storey blocks of apartments on sea level. Big question mark. Go to London, next to the Thames at Battersea, yeah, similar problem. Next picture. I thought, you Birkenhead lady, are you? There's, all right, there's the old Woodside there. Yeah. You remember the old Woodside station, the ferries and all that? Yes. Much of that's gone now, because they knew years ago there was a problem coming. Much has been demolished. It's been made into parkland. There are a few new apartment blocks, but they realise you can't develop that. If you go to the town hall, it's just off the picture here somewhere, that's on raised land, so it's high enough. But here, we're on a tidal area, and I can tell you now, I've been to the pontoon here, and the ferry's coming across, and when the ferry approaches, it's flooding the jetty. Yes. Because there's so much water. So we've got the evidence, it's all around. Okay, next one. When we look at the two coastlines, there's the northeast, and there's our western side. So Barrow-in-Furness, over this side to the Tees, Middlesbrough, further up, Tyneside, that sort of thing. Here we've got massive growth of people. They're building at Redcar a massive new industrial growth building area for housing. It's only 2 metres above mean sea level. It's the biggest development in Europe. It's where the old steelworks used to be. It covers something like about 300 acres, which has been fully developed at sea level. And the government's given the go-ahead, but it's not taxpayers' money. It's private investment. What are we doing?
Well,
Next
how
picture.
is this slipping into the sea?
Well, what they do is they build a bund so it doesn't flood. Like at Ganwick Quay with the Keys Hotel, they built a bund with a higher raised concrete wall around it. The tide. It's stone in the base with piling in the middle of it and these different shapes of stones to break the force of the tide, and then a concrete wall in the centre that comes up above it. Right? It's shown over 200 years, it protects from the tide. The Palm Islands in Dubai are protected totally by bunds, and thousands of people have bought houses there, out in the sea. You see, the trouble is we've learned so much science, so much technology, we're carrying on like we're God. We're not. Nature is more powerful. Next, thanks please. Next. I showed the docks, Liverpool is the Albert Dock area, I'm sure you've all been there. It's another area where there's been major new pumps put in. The water can drain out at low tides. It's an area that's seriously controlled, and of course it's a tourist site now, so it's got to work. It's got to, when you go there, you want to see the boats and go in the shops, and It's all at sea level. Next picture. Ellesmere Port, Telford was so clever. Do you know what? I'm sure there's some of you in here have read his life story. There's many biographies. I can't believe that one person, you'll love this, in 77 years did so much. In 1816, he was working on over 1,000 projects across Britain and in Europe. There were no railways, no decent roads because he was building them, hardly any bridges, and he says in his letter to William Hazelden, William, I like to visit every project to keep an eye on the construction. What, on horseback? No aeroplanes? How the heck? His effort is everywhere. Can I say something else? I'm not criticising Brunel or Stevenson or any of the others, Rennie, but virtually everything Telford designed we're still using, including crossing the Menai Strait Bridge, which is nearly 200 years old with modern vehicles. It's amazing. Okay, I diverse. Go on, next one. Right, this is Ptolemy's survey of the Blackburn coastline. He did come to Chester on a galley. He actually mentioned the name of the galley, so that's good. And they did go up the river so far to what we call Manchester. Manchester didn't exist then. They had a fortification there they called Castle Field. That's still there to this day. So he sketched what he saw. And archaeologists for hundreds of years were, rubbish. He's an idiot, you know. How could he sketch things like that? He had no idea. He didn't have geography or anything like that. He showed where the land was off West Kirby. He showed where the land was off Southport and up into the estuary area. Look, an estuary coming down to Earlscourt. Well, it's a floodplain now. It's where Martin Mere is, where people go to look at pretty birds that fly across Europe. The whole area was an estuary. The Ribble, Preston didn't exist. Only the ground that's high in Preston had buildings, and it went right up to Ribchester, and ships on a low tide, according to his records, could get to Ribchester, Roman fort. Similarly, this area, and look, Blackpool, he's noted at low tide, he didn't call it Blackpool, obviously, was a mud bank. Anybody been to Blackpool in the last 5 years? Go on, be honest. A lot of people are embarrassed with it. Great. Have you noticed something along the promenade? More concrete going in Blackpool than anywhere else in the UK. If you go north of Blackpool to Cleveland, you can't believe it. The promenade is 7 metres higher than the bungalows that everybody's retired to. They can't see the sea anymore. And it's thousands there. Oh, Chloe, we used to go there on holiday. Yeah, buy a bungalow. We'd be by the sea. Well, yeah, the problem's on the doorstep. So there's Ptolemy's sketch. Next picture. Sorry, I'm probably going on too long. And then, of course, the other clue we've got, when canals were built, they either needed salt water or fresh water to keep them topped up. In this northwestern area, we've got a whole series of canals, started with the Duke of Bridgewater and James Brindley, coming from Salford, Worsley, bringing coal into the growth of Manchester, blah, blah, blah. The Leeds and Liverpool, going over the Pennines, all that. All these canals were to link the coastlines, the ports, the industry. But you don't just put a canal straight through a landscape because you've got hills in the way and it costs tunnels and all sorts of things. So the canals are the clue to the water. But they were also designed not to flood with seawater. So they have got routes that actually just get them to the port. And if you look at the Worsley Canal that was extended to Runcorn, it's just slightly above the tidal bund areas. It's actually clear of them. So the canal engineers years ago knew what's happening now was going to happen. Next picture. So I mentioned Manchester, and of course Manchester grew differently to Birmingham. It was a group of small villages, communities. Stockport, Bolton, Bury, Rochdale, Oldham, all to do with the woolen and cotton industry. Birmingham was different. It was an industrial heartland. It started from the centre and grew outwards. Both cities have got major problems with water. Manchester, you know, it has one of the heaviest rainfalls in the country. That's why it was good for cotton production. Damp atmosphere, yeah? Right, next picture. Similarly, Liverpool, up to 1912, the biggest, most successful port on the planet. I find it amazing that ships were going from here up the Congo in Central Africa, up the Amazon, round Cape Horn and out into the Pacific. Ships were going everywhere from Liverpool. It's an amazing history. But many of the places those ships went to are now realising we've got a problem. In the Pacific, there are hundreds of atolls. You hear it in the news, in the Indian Ocean. Their land's disappearing. And they're all pointing the finger to us. Because we're the ones that have been polluting the atmosphere and making these changes for hundreds of years. Next picture. Oh, go on again. I saw ships in Liverpool. And here's a classic, okay? When we were invaded in the Norman Conquest, and we haven't really been invaded since then, Napoleon was going to try, many of those rich families from France and Spain that came in, and some from Gaul, Germany, that came into Britain during that great period, for them, they built their estates on hills. You know yourself, you go visiting those Norman estates, they're all up on high ground. And the castles they built are on high ground. Because there's parts of France, certainly through to Lyon, the link, what they call it, the famous canal, the Midi is it, that runs from Bay of Biscay down to the Mediterranean. Many of their estates there are above the water levels. That canal has no locks. Doesn't need them, because it goes from water level to water level. This is de Hoden's palace. 2 miles from Preston, on the first area of high ground, built, originally, the original building was about 1310, but then they developed it in 1564 to what it is now. They were one of the richest families linked to the Norman Conquest, and they owned all the lands going out to Blackburn. Their emblem is the white bull, and they used to breed white bulls on the Fylde, which is a word that's been changed from days in France, because Fylde, actually with French and Latin involvement, means flood. It's all clever, and people do learn, like you all have, living on the red rock of Rhuddlan. Yeah? Don't go to Rhuddlan. Next picture. I'm sorry, there's somebody from Rhuddlan. Right, okay. If you're not been to Ribchester, it's worth a visit. It's just here, inland from Preston. This used to be a long tidal estuary like the Dee years ago. It used to flood right the way through. It's been controlled now. The Rhuddlan has tidal banks either side. But now they're looking seriously at what effect it's going to have on the southern part of the town, because that's low-lying land next to the river. Heavy precipitation, strong winds, high tides. Problem, Preston. Next one. Really finished, I think. Oh, there's the Houghton. Have you been to Houghton Tower? Well worth a visit. Anybody into Shakespeare in the room? This is thought to possibly be where he ended up when he ended up in a court case in Stratford-on-Avon over poaching a deer. And he was a Catholic. And of course Elizabeth I was on the throne. And all Catholics that created crimes were either burnt at the stake or hung. So he had a school teacher friend from Talacra who lived in this area. And the story is supposed he persuaded him, go north, you'll get a job as a teacher at the Houghtons. So there's a little bit of evidence that this is where Shakespeare hid away. But he had to go back to Stratford to meet Anne Hathaway. It's another story. Right, next. Sorry, I diverse. Right, Liverpool, look, you can't take that picture now. Development. There's all these big black tower blocks here now, so that reflection in the dock isn't available, it's gone. Okay, next one. I think we're getting near the end. And I'm showing you a sunset over the docks at Birkenhead. And I would say, anybody who knows Birkenhead, it's been an amazing history. The docks at Birkenhead, if they hadn't existed, Shotton Steelworks wouldn't have lasted as long as it did. Because most of the iron ore at Shotton came from Kiruna in Norway into the docks here, and then by rail to Queensferry to the Shotton Steelworks. There's a lot of change going on, folks. Next one, I think we are at an end. I think so. Oh, and I come back to your area where I started. This is, I forget the date now, yeah, 1837. This is an Ordnance survey document, not a published map, which shows your area. So here's Rhuddlan. And it shows the whole area, right? The proposal for the railway along the coast is there. That's not constructed, it's a proposal. It's a surveyor's proposal of the route, 1837. They didn't start until 1845, because they had to go through 3 different acts to get their permission. It shows the hills behind you, and it shows the hills the other side over Abergele, and it shows that triangle I talked about earlier, the largest delta in North Wales. If the tide and the storms have their way, that will fill up that triangle again. There's not enough out there stopping it, and we don't have enough concrete. Next picture, I think I finished. Oh, I finished there. This is Boss, or God, whatever you like to call it. We've got heavy storms coming in across Ireland this weekend. I gather the rain's going to come tonight. The wind's going to build up tomorrow. If you do get the chance, you don't have to get out of your car. Just drive down to a prom and have a look. The waves are going to be phenomenal. Wind speeds are estimating 70 miles an hour. But we could reach temperatures this weekend of between 16 and 20 degrees, like a summer's day. But you're going to have a massive storm, and they reckon it's going to last into Sunday. Go and have a look at the tide. Yeah? Think of how the river fluid is when the tide's not in. There's been a lot of rainfall, and look at that, and that will tell you stories. I worked, final comment, sorry you're tired, but final comment, I worked on the new benchmarking on Llandudno, the main promenade. And if you go and walk the prom there, you'll notice something. It's higher now than the streets. The estimate with the Environmental Agency is through the next 60 years, Llandudno will probably flood at least once seriously every 10 years. Under the streets in Llandudno are electric cables, water supply and sewerage. And if the tide comes over that bund along the prom, it's going to go straight down into that lot like it did 11 years ago and cause serious, serious problems. There's a joke in Bangor, if you go on Bangor Pier, the real Welsh people in Bangor eyes, they stand on the pier and they look and they go, why are they putting wind turbines on top of Llandudno? Is it to lift it up? Because if you look from Bangor Pier, it looks like it's already in the sea. Okay, I hope you've enjoyed that. I hope I haven't shocked you too much. But can I just say, it's happening. It's not just hypothetical. Thank you very much.